It's never absolute certainty.
Absolutely.
But, so you're kind of like disprivileging it as like a zone of like the disclosure of truth, right?
Can you disclose truth with language? Yeah, no, I don't. Not generally, no. I mean, it depends, I guess, on what
I
you're
don't think
talking
that you
about.
can disclose truth with language, really.
I mean,
Like,
it depends on
math.
it depends on what you're talking about, and it depends on what kind of language you're talking about, or what you consider a language. Because I know that you want to say like, well, what about math? What if I communicate math to each other? But like theoretically, like math is something that can be like communicated without language, or you can use a language to. But like the language isn't the math. The language is just mapping onto like mathematical concepts. It's a fundamentally different thing. You're not creating math with language.
Math is a language.
No. Math comes before language, right? Languages
are true.
Okay, well, we just fundamentally disagree on that. If the whole whole universe were devoid of humans, would one rock and one rock still have like two rocks?
If the whole world was divorced of humans, there would be no concept of any of these things because they're human concepts. Like there'd be a totally meaningless question because there'd be no meaning in the world either. There'd be nothing to observe the world and be conscious of it. It would just be nothing.
Okay.
If there's no humanity in the universe, then the universe is entirely void and meaningless.
Exact time and place.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar with this concept. Okay. Well, what do you want to talk about next?
I don't know. Do you like books? I'm actually a book guy. Like I'm like my podcast is called Read Books VLT. Logo Daedalus, by the way, to shout myself out here. For anyone interested. But I mostly like books. Like, what books do you like? What's your favorite like novel?
I haven't read anything like recreationally for a long time. I just do. If I am reading stuff, it's usually like scientific studies and shit. I don't even remember the last thing that I read for fun. It's all like political shit, like some boring local politics.
Like what do you like?
In terms of fantasy or in terms of like
anything.
Honestly, it depends on what's going on. If I have a big debate coming up, I might be really interested in like World War II shit or like Russian history or something. But if it's just like on my own, I'm probably just like either playing games or listening to music instead, or watching movies or something.
Keep hating your life then, working class Andy.
So do you ever like read like the canon, as they say, like, you know, do like a great books course or something like?
Yeah, unfortunately, I did AP English 3 and 4, so we read a ton of like older, horribly boring shit. But yeah, so like the Odyssey and the Iliad and Beowulf and The Stranger by Camus
and like
Homer,
shit
like this. We must have read poetry by Homer. I think it was in one of our really big English books, but not like everything by him. I think he has like a ton of shit, right?
Thought it was boring.
Yeah, for sure. Homer,
really?
like Oedipus.
What translation did you read?
I don't know, but it was all incredibly boring to me. The translations suck, and they just.
You read a bad translation then, because that shit rocks.
Honest to God, I don't think it has to do with a bad translation. I think it has to do with, I think that when you're 16, 17, you don't give a fuck about any of the shit or any of these fucking stories.
It's not true for me, personally. I loved reading my whole life. All I care about is like reading. Okay. Like I loved reading. I read Homer when I was in 5th grade, and I loved it.
Okay.
I don't know. I just love books. I feel like reading is like really important because it like stretches your historical imagination, especially to like read things that people have been writing like from like thousands of years ago, etc. Just sort of like try to absorb like a large picture of human development in time. It's like what I'm interested in is trying to have like a really big picture view of things.
Okay.
I feel like you're not as interested in that, I guess.
Yeah, I think I am. I just don't typically get there by reading. It'll be through, or it won't be reading books usually. It just depends on what the subject is.
Like, what other means can you like say you wanted to like know how like a Roman thought in the year like 300 AD? Like,
could be through a documentary. It could be through some exploratory essay. It could be through a video. It could be through some sociological study. It could be, I don't know.
But like, I mean, like, how would you know like what they themselves like when you could just read themselves in like their own words, like
keep
or like
hating
through
your
a
life
translation,
then,
I suppose.
working class Andy.
Like ultimately like the closest you can get.
Maybe not necessarily. Just depends on what we're
talking
about.
You're like getting it mediated. Like if you're not reading primary sources, then you're just like getting it mediated by so many levels.
Oftentimes we lack the understanding to contextualize primary sources. That's why if you're reading a lot of high-level stuff, usually you'll have like annotated versions or stuff will be in the columns explaining like what a particular phrase meant or what they. So no, I don't even agree. That's not.
You can equip yourself.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, like at that point, it's not even like the primary source wouldn't necessarily be the most important. Like a more important might be a secondary.
Definitely the most important.
Okay.
Definitely. The primary sources are like so important. Like I always highly recommend people read primary sources. You know, like I feel like it's like a huge tragedy that like people don't read like Abraham Lincoln's like writings and like his letters and like John Adams and like the founding fathers, because like we have all these amazing like primary sources. You can just like read people's debates. Like I love reading like the old flame wars, you know, of like all of these people writing under pseudonyms during the Revolutionary War era. Like it's so much like our own present time, you know, like everyone writing under like pseudonyms and like flaming each other and trying to get people kicked off of newspapers and whatnot. It's literally the same thing going on today.
Sure.
So like that's why I think primary sources are like you can't really get that sort of feeling of like how similar things are without
I mean,
like
if you want to go like an
directly engaging with
extreme, like
primary
some people would
sources.
say that like reading translated text then won't even do this for you, right? This is why some people that study moral philosophy
Yeah,
like won't
that's
do it unless they
definitely
can read like
true.
German. So
It's definitely true to a degree. Like you can get more or less like better or worse like translations. Like ultimately, like there is something lost in translation, or there's things even added or whatever in translation. Like that's one of the biggest problems I think with like Western Marxists is that like the specific translations of Marx's work into English have like totally botched some of like the vocabulary from like German idealist thought, and it's like led to like these complete like aberrations of thought that people think are like Marxist, and they're like not at all. They're like completely wrong. It's like most of the time when people are using the term like abolish and like quoting Marx, they're like they're like completely desecrating the source material.
okay.
So there's like a lot of stuff like that for sure. Like you gotta like if you want to like get into things, you have to like be really serious. You know, like it takes a lot of work to like really read. It's like a lifelong job.
Gotcha.
I think. I don't know. That's what I'm interested in. I feel like you like you're more like you play strategy games. Do you ever play Advance Wars by Web?
Nope.
Oh, do you ever play Advance Wars like at all?
No, I've never heard of it before.
Fire Emblem?
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Like Fire Emblem, but like with like modern army stuff, basically.
Okay.
It's like a Nintendo franchise from like a long time ago. It's just like a really basic like turn-based strategy game. But that's the only game I play. They have like an online service for it. It's pretty fun. You should check it out sometime. You like RTSs, like you like StarCraft, right? Like
Yeah.
you probably dig it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Got a really deep competitive scene.
gotcha. I'll consider it if I have time.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably better than Elden Ring, but I don't know. Elden Ring, I heard, is okay. I mean, like, it's interesting to me because, like, I feel like you engage a lot with, like, video games. Like, video games are kind of, like, they have, like, an element of the literary to them, like, sort of very subvertly, you know? Like Elden Ring is based off of so much of, like, Western fantasies influence in Japan, you know?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the video game you're playing, sure.
Aren't you like fighting? Like I was watching you fighting bosses or something, and they describe someone as being from like the Empyrean.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's in the lore. That's like it's like Christian. That's like esoteric Christian theology and stuff. So like you're playing this game, which is like full of like like Renaissance like esoteric Christian theology and things like this, and like you probably have no idea.
Probably not. I mean, when it comes to Japanese stuff, there's a ton of influence, especially from like World War II and stuff, in a lot of their art and media and so. But yeah, I imagine that's probably the case. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's one thing that I find really funny is like people really like video games, and it's like they play these games and you're not even equipped to like understand what like the artist who made the game is trying to say with it.
Sure, but I mean that's true of literally all media, right?
Really, I don't know. I feel I'm like pretty good at reading.
Sure, but I mean,
It's
I'm
like
sure
what I
there's like a
think
ton
you
of
need to get
movies
better
that
at.
you've
I
watched
think that's, like,
that
what
you've
expand
probably
your
looked and
mind.
you don't like recognize that like some shots are being copied from other films or they're paying like
I'm pretty good on that though. I like film a lot.
okay, never mind.
You like film? Are you like more of a film guy?
Yeah.
I know a lot, dude. I've devoted my life to this. This is what I do, you know? Like I take it as like a responsibility. Like I'm gonna be telling people things, especially things that like disagree with sort of like mainstream shit. Like I have a responsibility to be like really fucking good, like knowing a lot and like reading a lot, like being very devoted to like research.
Okay.
That's what I do. I don't know. Do you like movies more? Are you more of a film guy?
Yeah, I guess probably more than at least reading at
Like
least.
manga?
Not really. I don't like comics at all.
Okay. No, I feel like you're like probably hitting like diminishing returns on like I don't know if do you feel like you're like cool with like how you understand the world right now? Like, do you want to learn more about the world, or do you feel like you pretty much get it?
I feel really good about my understanding of the world, and I'm trying to constantly expand my understanding of the world. So yeah, I'll probably continue to do so.
How do you go about like expanding your understanding of the world?
Super depends on the topic. I can't generalize that, right? Just recently, we had a whole bunch of conversations related to trans people. So I had a whole bunch of like trans fans like email me and their experiences like being trans. Like that might be.
Do you ever
one way
read
of
about the history of transgenderism?
Depends
like,
on if I'm arguing the history of trans experiences or not, or if I want to know what people's modern day like trans experiences are like.
Do you ever hear about? Do you know that there was a transgender Roman emperor?
Nope.
Elagabulus.
Okay.
It didn't say Simon Says.
Yeah. So that was a big thing in Rome. It's actually pretty like trad. It's like one of the fun things I used to talk to the right wing guys about. I'd be like, this is all very trad. It's all just Roman stuff. To come back, like we're just like Roman pagans in America.
Okay.
We have the Colosseums, you know, like the Super Bowls, just like gladiators. You know, our celebrities are like basically like the gladiators. You're a gladiator, you know? You're like the esports gladiator, and now you like fight like, you know, people politically. You like went from like, you're like what, you're gonna like be the gladiator who gets into the Senate, you know? It's kind of Roman.
Okay.
Do you feel me on that? Do you feel me on America being Rome?
Maybe to some extent, but all right.
I mean, we are an empire.
Sure.
Do you agree that America is an empire?
Yeah, probably, I guess. Depends on how you define empire, but sure.
I mean, then you'd say it's not a republic, right? So it's not a democracy. It's like an empire.
Well, I mean, it's obviously a democracy, but...
You think so?
Yeah, of course.
Why?
Because we vote on our elected leaders.
That's all it means.
Yep, that's what a democracy is. Yeah, that's
all it is.
Pretty big
It
part
means
of
you
it.
vote on your elected leaders, really?
Yep.
It's not how it worked in Athens.
Okay.
It's not how it worked in like the Italian Republic, the Venetian Republic, or you know, trading
the
republics.
public didn't vote on anything in there, but they
Carthage.
still call them democracies?
They didn't vote on the leaders, no.
What did they vote on?
They voted on issues.
Okay, so then they voted on things, right? We have a representative democracy. We can't vote on every single
Yeah,
issue, so we vote on
the people
leaders.
who voted were citizens. Citizens voted, and they voted on issues because they would like organize, like the Senate, just the families, like the heads of the families of the city, right? That's it. So they didn't elect their leaders. Their leaders, well, I guess you could say they chose like amongst their like families or their clans, like the person that was going to represent their household in the Senate, right? But like they didn't like elect their representative, like.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
like,
Democracy can work in a ton of different ways, right? But typically, as long as there's like some representation from the public in either the leaders or the
I
policies.
think Russia has a democracy.
I don't think so. No.
They vote.
I don't know. Actually, no. Actually, I think I might have to be agnostic on that. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go.
Don't know if they vote.
I don't know if their votes matter.
Oh, your votes have to matter for it to be a democracy.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the point of voting.
I feel like your vote matters.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I don't feel like mine matters. I don't vote.
Well,
Like
that's
most
probably why
Americans.
your vote doesn't matter then.
Most Americans don't vote because most Americans understand that our votes don't matter.
I think most Americans don't vote because they're apathetic of the process. Your votes obviously matter because
Why are they
leaders
apathetic? They're apathetic
for a
because
variety of
it
reasons.
doesn't matter.
But it absolutely does matter. How do we choose our leaders?
doesn't.
It's based on who gets the most votes.
Don't.
Yeah.
Don't choose our leaders.
Really?
Simple. Yeah.
Did the establishment choose Trump?
In a way, yeah, especially in 2020.
Okay.
And they wanted him over Hillary, like the GOP. At least a large enough segment, enough of the donors did. You could look at like Trump's donors in 2016. Most of them weren't his donors in 2020. There's like a
Didn't
big
Hillary
shift in,
Clinton
like-
have an overwhelmingly larger amount of donors than Trump did from large monetary sources?
Yeah, but Trump.
So that
like,
statement
had
is like totally contrary
donors
to
from
your
like the
point.
Mercers. No. He got a ton of money from the Mercers in 2016, but they didn't give him money in 2020.
Okay, I don't know what that's supposed to prove.
I'm just saying, like at a certain point, like you know, the establishment did approve of having Trump, right? They didn't do a Bernie to him, you know. I guess he couldn't. He was like more anti-fragile, but like
Nobody
obviously
had to
like
do a Bernie
could
to him
have
because
won.
Bernie couldn't have won. Bernie lost horribly in his own party.
But why?
twice. Because he's not that popular.
Why isn't he popular?
Because his policies aren't that popular with the American people.
What policy is unpopular?
Medicare for all was not as popular as he thought it was. The fixation on education, the kind of like fixation on like the socialist aesthetic is not that popular. yeah, I don't know. Basically any number of.
That because like consumer research and like PR firms and stuff did polls on like interest groups, and they found that these things didn't poll as well. That's like how you're gonna say this is like true, is because like
based on the widespread
like
opinion
PR
of like
firms
American people.
tell us that.
I'm sorry. Did you talk to every single American so you know that that's not true, or?
Oh no, I don't feel the need to like I just make statements that I don't care about like trying to buttress like a sociological point with like polls and things like that. I just
so how do you understand sociological issues?
Through like science, like in larger sense.
How do you think?
Like, through,
how do you
like,
think social sciences?
My ability to.
How do you think social
I
science?
don't believe in the social sciences.
Okay, how do you use
I believe in
science?
hermeneutics.
What does that mean?
Hermeneutics. It's the science of like reading. It's like how to interpret. It's like the science of interpretation.
What are you reading to figure out what most people in the United States think about a certain policy?
I read themselves. Like, I read like a lot of different people from like all over the place.
So you've read the opinions of all the Americans. Like, what your statement doesn't mean anything.
I've read
it's
a lot
nonsense,
of opinions.
Right? That doesn't matter.
From a lot of different people.
At some point, you're going to read so many then that you might as well just be doing polling, like because you're talking about like getting statements from like a ton of people.
I don't think that's true, because polling only gets people who are attracted to like doing polling, right? Or like who are going to like sign up for a sociological study to be polled or whatever.
And reading is only going to find people that feel like writing things down. I mean, like your selection bias either way.
True. I'm not claiming this to be a scientific process. I'm saying
you literally just said you like to use science to figure these.
I mean in the high sense of science, not in the delimited sense of like.
So like in a scientific way then. So in things that have nothing to do with science, but you like to use the word because it makes you feel better about the process, or because whatever you're describing is not scientific.
I'm using the word as Leibniz. Do you know Leibniz?
Nope.
I'm using science the way Leibniz would use the term science. I think you're more of a Newtonian. You're saying that that's science, but like hermeneutics is not science.
Okay, that's fine. I just got confused because you said
that's fine
science, but okay.
I know. See, like we run into confusion sometimes because we use words, but we mean different things by them, right? Mm-hmm. But we can still communicate our concepts. We can also understand like the disjunctions and like possibly the history of the disjunctions of these definitions, right?
Sure.
So there's like a whole genealogy to like the synonyms and like what words mean. Like there's a history to a word's meaning. It's like beyond our own opinions of it, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
I don't know. I mean, do you want to talk to me about anything? I don't know. I'm just like picking your mind. I feel like you're interesting to me because you're like you have all of the correct liberal opinions. Like it's like you might as well have gone to like an Ivy League university and gotten trained in all of this shit to like have the correct opinions like as a liberal, because like you did it yourself. It's like amazing to me. Like you have the exact same arguments as like an adjunct TA at the philosophy department of Harvard.
Okay.
But, like, just saying.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I like.
You're like a utilitarian.
I like to be the mainstream safest opinions. That's me. What am I gonna do?
It's not mainstream. I'm saying you've adopted like very high prestige opinions. Even though that's not your like class background. Like you're like I know we have the same fucking background. Really, I know your background. Like you're like a working class. You're like from the working class. You're not from like sort of like bourgeois sphere. You've like ascended into it. Okay. Right? But like that's not where you're from.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know how to engage with that, but okay.
I'm not trying to insult you. I'm just saying, like, am I wrong?
No, I understand. I'm just I don't. Yeah, I guess I don't think of my opinions that way. Like, do I match up enough with like the Ivy League elite, ruling class opinion structure or whatever? I don't know. That's not what I think about, but.
I mean, you kind of do, because like that's like where all of your like when you point to like authorities, right? Like you're pointing towards this like nexus of like elite like professional academia. Mm-hmm. You like really like the like authority of like the educated, right?
I like to trust like authoritative. I like to trust like empirically validated processes. I think is important. And then if people want to have more qualitative discussions, I think that's fun too, as long as we understand the limitations of those discussions. So when I'm trying to figure out what people believe in the United States,
do you think that there's limitations?
Yeah, there's limitations to everything. Yes.
Okay. Like, is there limits to like the empirical data, like the study of empiricism? Does empiricism have limits?
Sure, everything has limits. Depends on what we're talking about, right? Like we can't empirically validate art as good or bad, for instance. That would be one limitation.
Yeah, you can't empirically validate someone's politics as good or bad, right?
Correct.
So then it comes down to like really we're discussing like what story, like what world do we live in? Like do we
Well, but
live,
we can like
what
empirically
is the
validate like how many
vision
people
of the world
support
that
like
we-
a given policy, right? That might be an important question to ask.
I don't really think that matters that much, frankly. My view of the world, like what people like are trained to think about something doesn't even mean that they're necessarily trained to like say what they really think, but like a lot of the times people are just sort of like repeating like received opinion.
Sure.
They haven't really like investigated the matter for themselves, or
That's
they might
probably
even
the
be lying
vast
to
majority of
themselves.
people's opinions on the vast majority of things in society. Yeah, because most people don't
Yeah,
really care that much.
I agree.
Sure.
I agree. I think that's by design. Like, you know, like we have a massive structure for the
I don't
molding
think that's
of the
by
minds.
design. I think that life today is really complicated, and I don't think we've ever been that informed in the
This is
history
a-
of all of mankind on every single issue. I don't think that's the case.
Well, I would say that like when you're talking about the Republic of like the early Americas, that was like the most literate, like engaged population in human history at the time. You
I
know?
don't know if that's true. Back then, weren't we
It is
originally?
true. You just got to read it. You got to read their debates, man. They were like quote. They were
Hold
very.
on. Wait. Hold on. Back then, didn't we? We didn't even have like normal citizens voting on the president. No, I thought that only people with like land could vote and shit, and literacy rates were not that great.
Depends on what you're talking about. No, I'm talking about Massachusetts.
I'm talking
like,
about
in
I'm talking about the
17th
early
century.
United States of America, which is what you were talking about. Wasn't it true that back then that
Said
like
the Republic.
okay, the 13 colonies like
Well, the 13 colonies weren't all one thing. They weren't governed as one thing. There were various like types of governance in the 13
do you think the
colonies. But
literacy rate in
Massachusetts had a republic.
Massachusetts was it higher than like the literacy rate in the
It's
United
higher
States?
than anywhere in the world. Had laws for public literacy. They were called the Old Deluder Satan laws. It was like a public need to educate everyone in how to read so that they wouldn't be like ensnared by Satan, of course.
Do you think that the literacy rates in Massachusetts then were higher than the literacy rates in the United States now, or?
Yeah, I actually probably think they are. Like we have a very high like effective literacy rate. Like literacy rates have actually been declining.
And this is before black people were allowed to learn how to read, right?
Well, these are the people who would like later be teaching black people how to read, right? Like we're talking about the Puritans. Like they like black people, like that's one of the saddest things. No, black people
Keep
had like a
hating your
very
life
strong
then,
literate
working class
culture. They
Andy.
really valued the written word and like learning how to read because they were disbarred from it. So like they like, and I think they still do. I mean, I think if you're just gonna say there's like a literary culture in America, it's like mostly like, you know, comes out of like rap music and stuff like that because these people are like poets and they like really value language and the power of language.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like what I care about, you know, like I care about like language to me is like humanity. That's our like defining feature is like that we use and have created language.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think that's like important stuff. But yeah, no, like I don't know how much you know about like the history of like earlier America, but like, you know, like it was the most literate society like of all time at a certain point. Because it was like a public need and people took everything like very seriously because they were running their society as like simultaneously like a church and a state. Like it was all tied into one thing. So like the questions of like how do you run a church, like ecclesiastical policy and like, you know, Presbyterian policy, etc., was the same thing on like how you run elections and how you like determine the distribution of land and the distribution of resources within a society. Like, you know, that was like what the whole Massachusetts Bay Colony was about. It was like a communist experiment.
Okay. Tony, my chat wants me to ask you, do you believe in T-Rexes?
I believe in T-Rexes.
No.
What do you mean? Do I believe in a T-Rex? What does it mean to believe in it? I don't know what that means.
Real thing. He just wants to know some guy in my
What do you
chat wants to know
mean?
opinions about paleontology in general, I guess, and then he's asking about T-Rexes.
Oh, I mean, paleontology sus just because of like who was involved in like it was like the oil industry and they were like trying to. There's a lot of sus stuff about like archaeology and the petroleum.
Wait, Eric, how did
industry.
you know he was going to say that? Wait, what the fuck?
I don't know. I'm not. I'm gonna let it go on that because frankly, when I was a child, dinosaurs were like reptiles and now they're birds. So you know,
Was it real
I don't
dinosaur
know.
or was
I
it
don't know if we
invented
are
by the fact
fully
that oil
aware of,
barons
like,
financed
the
paleontologists?
evolutionary history.
Wait, how did you know this, Eric?
Creatures that have ever roamed the earth for all time. Like I'm not that confident about our state of knowledge on that.
Okay, interesting. What did you think about my? You said initially you watched me talking to Haas. What do you think about my debate with Haas about Ukraine and Russia?
Oh, I mean, I'm definitely side way more with Haas. I mean, I studied Russian. Like, I can speak Russian. I have a lot of like Russian friends. I'm definitely more aware of like the history of Russia and the Soviet Union and that whole area. So, I mean, if you want to get into that, like, we can talk about it. Like, how far back you want to go? We're talking about Ukraine.
Why do you think that?
Obama.
Do you think that Russia's current invasion of Ukraine is justified? Curious.
Yeah, I'm very much anti-NATO. NATO's just the Fourth Reich, dude. Like, literally, NATO.
Okay, wait. I
is,
just
like...
realized I don't care about this. Never mind.
Oh yeah, okay, you don't care, right? It's gonna be difficult to talk about.
I just,
You don't care. You haven't read that much about it. You don't care now.
Yes,
Yeah, I
that's
got
right.
it.
Okay, is there any other thing you want to go over, or?
I don't know. I really want to talk about how NATO's the Fourth Reich because apparently that's really controversial for you. And that was what Hitler wanted. Hitler wanted
I
NATO.
know.
That was like that was his goal. His goal was the United States of Europe.
Yep.
That's what he wanted.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, listen.
Real. True.
Obama.
It's been fun. We've kept
Okay.
it real.
All right. The handler's out. Get him off. Talk about the Fourth Reich of NATO. Get him off.
Obama.
It's all right. It's been good talking to you. I hope it's been amicable. I hope I'm not too annoying.
Sure. Okay.
I'm just interested. I feel like you need to read more.
Obama.
I don't know. Like, there's not you can't have as much of like an in-depth conversation about like, you know, the development of philosophy and history through time and shit if you like don't read. Like, it's just you're gonna be stuck talking about like the news of the week or whatever while you play Elden Ring.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because it feels like you've read a lot. You claim to, and you use words like you have. You have a really difficult time engaging critically with conversation, which is always interesting. I don't meet many people like that. You could also be lying
Or like
about
a
reading
Socratic inquirer.
It's not a Socratic
Or like,
inquiry. So like when we have the conversation related to
Obama.
language, you have a very hard time like actually critically engaging with what I'm saying. And if you've actually read as much literature on language as you said, it
Have
seems
you
like
read
you should be
Wittgenstein?
really. I was just about to bring that name up because I knew you were going to.
Obama.
I don't. Either you haven't or you're a good reader, but you don't understand the material, which is interesting to me.
Do you read the philosophical investigations?
I have a very bad engagement with literature because I'm pretty.
Obama.
I'm just lazy, honestly.
Okay. Well, you should read the philosophical
But it's
investigations.
crazy that if you've read so much, I don't know how you lack the ability to critically engage with the ideas in a conversation. That's always scary to me. I don't know if you care, but I think you're probably used to
I
like
don't feel like
rambling.
I feel like I am critically engaging.
You haven't
Like,
critically
can
engaged with anything.
Poll
You're
your
kind of like
audience.
you like you.
Can you poll your audience whether or not they feel like critically engaged in the conversation?
Sure. Do you feel like?
I don't know. I feel like I have. I don't really know what you mean. Maybe you mean critical engagement in like a specific type of like performance of rhetoric, but I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Should I explain it before I pull it? When I say critically engage, what I mean is there's multiple stages of reading something and assimilating it and then being able to deploy it in conversation effectively. So it's one thing to read a book. It's another thing to read it and understand it. It's another thing to read it, understand it, and then be able to synthesize the concepts into something that you understand. And then it's a fourth thing to be able to take those concepts from the book and then argue with somebody else and apply the concepts that you've learned fluidly in the conversation. That's what I would consider to be like mastery of the material, basically. Usually when I see
feel
people
like I
that
did
have
that.
no, not at all.
I don't know.
Usually I feel like primitive material will be like
How'd you know,
saying,
though?
I'm
How
about
would
to.
you
I'm
know?
trying to explain, but you won't let me explain, right? So like a primitive engagement is something that I'm very used to, which you've done a couple times. I've had a couple people do this. Usually they'll just say like, "Oh, I've read this," or "Oh, you should read that," or "Oh, I've read this." But that's not really good use of the material.
Aren't you talking about the experience? How you
No,
have
hold on.
a common
Wait, can I just
experience?
finish? Let me just finish, right? So that's one way, right? There's a couple people that I've read, not that I've read, that I've argued with that have really good engagement literature. So one person on this platform, if you want to go talk to her at some point, the Silly Serious, she's read a lot of social science related or like feminist writings and everything. When we're having a conversation, she might say something like, "Oh, like I understand what you're saying here. It reminds me of this concept brought up by this writer, and she explains it in this way, and I think that's how that applies to this conversation." Like that would be like a critical engagement with a conversation. You're taking something you've read.
Yeah, that would
you
be more
understand it.
useful for you, is what you mean.
No, not useful. It shows that you understand the material and you understand the conversation. That's what the actual engagement with the critically engaging with the material in the conversation.
Okay, what would you like me to critically engage with more? I think I could do that.
Well,
for you.
well, it sounds like you basically have you've got like a view of the world that I don't want to say is conspiratorial, but you have like in your mind some view of the world, and then I guess you have some books that you've read that kind of like touch on that, or like engage with that or intersect with that, but like you don't really have much interest in talking to or like really ironing out those differences or making them more concrete. Let me give a more definable example of this. Oftentimes when I speak to people like you want to talk in very grandiose, grand narrative terms without ever really getting into, I don't want to say getting into the weeds or something, but being a little bit more grounded to your examples. And instead that we hear like, oh, like what are society's problems today? Well, society's problems today are that the internet came out of like the World War II Manhattan Project, and the U.S. military global industrial empire process built this concept that atomized all of society in such a way that we can't truly relate to each other because the empire that America has and the advertising that we exported to the world eliminated our ability to understand each other. It's like some very grand. It's like
we created a virtual society.
Yeah, exactly. And these are like fun things to like masturbate over and talk about it, but you're not really saying.
What do you mean? This is reality.
You're not saying anything meaningful or anything insightful. Like nothing you said in this conversation is like, oh wow, that's really interesting. It's all just kind of like built on this like very flowery, pointless, useless language. Yeah, no, nothing you said is interesting.
Flowery, pointless. That's
all of this has been flowery, pointless.
That's the material history of the internet.
Okay.
It's like how it came to be.
Gotcha.
How is that not interesting? Like you're using it. Like it's informed everything about our lives.
Nothing about it's just nothing about this has been like informative or talks about how we're informed by it. It's all just kind of like self-masturbation basically. It's like
Obama.
I don't think I'm being masturbatory. I think that's not very good faith of you.
Well,
I'm trying to explain something to you. I'm trying to we could go into the weeds and things. I could explain to you how NATO like turned into the Fourth Reich. Like we could have a conversation about that. Like you don't want to talk about like the specifics of it. Like,
sure, how is NATO like? How is NATO like the Fourth Reich? Go ahead and tell me. I'm curious.
Do you know about like Otto Skorzeny or like any of like the SS officers who were moved into like NATO powers like after World War II?
Nope.
Well, a lot of the like high command, the Nazi high command, like obviously like at the end of World War II, we're like, well, we want to go to war with the Soviet Union, right? Because we don't like these commies either. So who's good at fighting the communists? Well, the Nazis, obviously. So we just put them in charge of NATO.
And that was the
yeah, it was. That's what I mean. That's like if you read like Churchill and like some of the other people, they were like, wow, we went to the like we fought
Are these
the wrong
people that moved into NATO high command? Or are you just talking about like scientists that we drafted from Germany?
Talking about like Adolf Husinger, Adolf Husinger, Adolf Husinger.
Also, why would we even say that Nazis are good at fighting the Russians? Didn't they technically lose?
Well, you know, there's a lot of questions about that, right? I mean, if you read Gravity's Rainbow, or you know, a lot of more interesting histories of World War II, there's a lot of like collaboration there. Like, what's going on in Switzerland that whole time? You know, weird stuff, man. World War II is a very complicated situation.
Okay, so wait, so you don't think that Germany lost to Russia, or you think that they fake lost, or that other people made them lose, or?
I think that the industrialists and like the ancien regime within Germany was opposed to Hitler, but were not necessarily opposed to fighting the Soviets, right? Like they were pro fighting the Soviets, but they didn't really quite like Hitler. So they collaborated with like the British intelligence services, right? Like that's how we had like all of the Nazi documents. Like we had all of their communications throughout all the war, because like the ancien regime and like the industrialists, the people with like the real power in Nazi Germany, like outside of the state, or like in like the sort of deep state of Nazi Germany, they collaborated across lines because they wanted to like join up like this sort of like European defense against communism. Like they were like Hitler never wanted to go to war with Britain, like, you know, and in fact, like the royal family, like a lot of people in the royal family were really close with the Nazi commanders, right? Because like there's this whole world of like hereditary aristocracy, which is like tied together, and like they were using the Nazis basically to like defend themselves against like the communists.
Gotcha. Who you mentioned?
That's like what we're doing right now.
You mentioned like a Skorzeny guy.
Yeah, Otto Skorzeny or like Adolf Husinger. There's like a bajillion people.
Somebody mentioned that this guy escaped imprisonment in Germany and died an outlaw in Argentina. No connection to NATO whatsoever. Is that true, or is that guy lying?
I'm saying there's a lot of sus like NATO people. Like I'm saying all of the things
was that guy a NATO person at all, or was that just like a random
name? We're gonna go with Adolf Husinger. I like talking about Skorzeny because he has a wild, wacky story. That's the only reason I brought up.
Was he part of NATO?
But if we want to talk about someone specifically, when we're talking about NATO, it's Adolf, Heusinger. Okay? He was the chairman of the NATO Military Committee. Okay? There's like one of many people. I can bring up others. There's like Hans Speidel. He was the head of NATO forces in Central Europe. There's bajillions, millions, like tons and tons and tons. It's like just the tip of the fucking iceberg on this. But yeah, like the Nazis, the Nazi high command, were very much involved in NATO, right? And like we were running like Operation Gladio to like fuck with the Italian communists and things like that in their elections and new terrorist attacks. We do a bunch of shit. We arm neo-Nazis all over the place. We arm neo-Nazis all over Latin America. This is like what the CIA did. After they did it like World War II as like the OSS, or like even before that, it's the British Security Coordination. Like this is how the British Empire ruled the fucking world, and it's how we rule the world. It's like why we're talking about winning information victories, right? Like we're talking about the information warfare of the thing. It's because we have a massive public relations empire, so we can create a completely fictitious reality in which us arming neo-Nazis with billions of dollars is us defending European democracy. You know, it's literally the same thing as what happened during World War II.
Sorry, hold on. I'm just
Anything about
reading
that,
because
though?
I'm just curious. It's a fact check. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no. You know, obviously they're not going to teach you this in school, dude. Like, right? Like, they want you to support NATO. So, like, why would they teach you about this? The news isn't going to talk to you about this. Like, the liberal news isn't going to be talking about this. Like, the people who are funded by, like, the military-industrial complex for the same donors, the same web of financiers, like, they're not going to be like, oh, yeah, by the way, let's talk about, like, the dark history of NATO. We're the good guys.
Okay, let me
know?
just
We're
let me
defending
ask
the
a
world.
question. Okay, because my World War II history sucks. The SS is not necessarily the German military, right? Like this was an extra like paramilitary organization, right?
It was like the German CIA.
Yes.
Like the
Yeah.
Nazi
Okay.
CIA.
Correct. Adolf Husinger, was this guy part of the SS? Doesn't look like it. It looks like he looks like this guy was like serving the German military for like 30 fucking years, like even way before Hitler, like under the German Empire, the Weimar Republic, and
He's
this guy even
Army
tested.
General
This guy,
Staff of the Wehrmacht.
this guy also testified, and he testified during the Nuremberg trials as well. Was this guy like a horrible evil person, or?
Well, I mean, the question is not like what do you like? Do you care about like the personal morality of this person or whatever? Like what I'm saying is that like this power structure like merged.
Well, hold on. I'm just so one thing like there's like the whole like mixing everything together to make like conspiracies on purpose. So this guy wasn't part of like the SS at all, right?
He was the head of the Wehrmacht, so like I can find people who are involved with the SS who work for NATO. Like, is that what you want?
Well, you've named two names so far. When I've looked into both of them, your claims are totally bullshit on both. And then you brought up a fictional story to talk about it. So I'm just curious, like, because when you tell me the Gravity Rainbow, isn't that a piece of fiction?
It's a historical fiction, right? Like a lot of it is not fiction. It's like a fiction that's like contains a lot of like really like esoteric history, because at the time Thomas Pynchon, right, he worked for Boeing, I believe, and he had access to like the V2 papers from World War II.
Okay,
So
yeah,
he was
different thing. So who else were there actual like Nazis, like horrible Nazi people that made it into NATO? Can you try a third name? I'm just curious because that's a new thing.
What do you mean like horrible? Like I'm just telling you,
like not
I'm
just
making a
somebody,
moral
not just
judgment.
somebody that was like in the German military.
Like, so, I don't know. What do you want someone who's like what? Like,
well, your original
what do you-
claim, because you tried to say that NATO was like the Fourth Reich. That's your thesis.
Yeah,
and
it
one of the
is.
supporting statements you made was that we drafted a lot of horrible Nazis from like the SS and shit into NATO. And I've looked up two of the names
I'm
you've
not
mentioned.
making a
One
moral
was had nothing to do.
judgment.
No, hold on. Yes, whether you want to or not. We're not even at the moral part. We're just descriptively. I'm curious if the original NATO was staffed by a ton of Nazis. You've given me two names. The first guy had nothing to do with NATO. The second guy had nothing to do with the SS. So I'm just curious if this was actually the case, or if it's just like another random claim. What's like a third guy that was like drafted from the SS or from like the Nazi part of Germany? Like who was drafted to NATO from here? You said NATO was the Fourth Reich. That's what I'm curious. Is there any other connection?
Okay,
or?
so what was the Third Reich? What was the goal of Hitler, like of the Nazi Party? What did they want to do?
I don't know. Expand some Aryan Empire across all of West or some moral Stratcon bullshit or whatever. I don't know. I'm sure he had a lot of
Like
different
NATO?
goals. No, not like NATO. NATO is a member, is a bunch of independent countries that join, if they want to, with an organization that only is there to provide military assistance. We don't have any external controlling things. There's not like a NATO government that
They have
dictates
bases? Are there NATO bases on
Yes.
country soil?
But are there policies in these countries being controlled by the United States? No.
Yeah,
No. What do you mean?
they are.
Like what?
We spend a lot of money controlling the policy, like the Nord Stream.
I hear so much about this. I haven't read enough about this. So, tell me why you think NATO controlled the Nord Stream 2 shit.
Because we want Europe to buy oil and natural gas from America, not from Russia, obviously.
Things aren't always what they seem.
So, tell me how NATO did. What did NATO like force countries to accept this, or did they vote on it and want to accept it?
Do you know the Rand Corporation? You ever heard of the
I've
Rand
heard of them.
Corporation?
Yeah, they get cited all the time.
You should read. They have a paper. I'll look it up for you right now. They planned this whole thing out. Like this isn't like Crimean.
I always hear the Nord Stream 2 shit cited, and I haven't like read enough about it to have like strong opinions on it.
The energy dimensions of Russia's annexation of Crimea are lessons from Russian operations in Crimea and eastern blah 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 blah. Russia does not seem to be after Ukraine's gas reserves, etc., etc., etc. Like we have like our whole like war plan for this area is based around like oil pipelines and blocking the oil pipeline that the Russians were building in the Nord Stream, so we can build our oil pipeline that comes up through the Ukraine, which is why we're trying to hold on to it, so that we have like the crossroads of like where oil and natural gas is sold in that area, because that's how we maintain our global hegemony. Like that's how we maintain
the Nord
our
Stream
global
pipeline is
hegemony.
basically for the purpose of buying gas from Russia.
Yeah, that was the purpose, but now it's been halted.
What is it? But this is through Ukraine. That isn't even a NATO country. What does this have to do with NATO forcing things on other countries?
How do you think we do that?
Do what?
Does America like do any sort of like influence campaigns like in Europe to like influence their domestic
Everybody's
policies and
influencing
things?
everybody all the time for everything.
Okay.
So I'm sure we do. Sure.
Okay, so do you think that like we would like say influence this or destabilize this region to
Hold
make
on.
sure that
Destabilizing a
say,
region is way different than influencing things. These are two fundamentally different claims. Everybody influences everybody. of
What's the
course.
difference? Well,
The difference is that one can be running advertisement
America
campaigns, doing
destabilizing?
lobbying, doing presentations in front of government people. It could be public campaigns. There's a whole different thing versus like invading a country or like blowing shit up or terrorist activities
About
or
arming,
sanctions
like,
or terrorists.
terrorists in an area.
Sure, arming terrorists in an area would be like a violent intervention. Sure.
Okay, so do we do that?
In Europe?
Yeah.
Where?
I mean, historically we did this in Italy.
I'm not.
right?
Or
At
historically?
one
No,
point.
no, 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 no. In the past like 20 years.
Eastern Europe, like the Balkans. Bro. What was Clinton doing?
What
dude?
were
Come on.
the extremists? What were the terrorists that we were arming?
Dude, which ones when, dude? Like, we do this all the fucking time.
Then name a
That's
couple.
difficult. I'm talking about the Azov battalion
Okay.
right now.
We don't arm the
Talking
Azov
about, like,
battalion, and the
Europe.
Azov battalion doesn't
Yes, we
exist
do.
right now. No, we don't.
Yeah, we do. We just sent arms over to Ukraine. Do you think
We
that
send
any of those
arms to
will find their
Ukraine.
way to
Ukraine has a military, and the Azov battalion is part of that military.
trained their military, by the way?
What?
Trained their military.
I don't know. I'm sure they get probably help from all sorts of people. Probably some from the West, but. Why you wait? Hold
Yeah,
on.
we
You're,
trained
no,
it.
do you see how you're pivoting from one topic to the next every single time you get like?
I don't see it as different topics.
Okay,
They're,
okay.
like,
Let's
interrelated.
let's like try to stay on one thing instead of hopping when you realize that you're like talking about. Because it started with like I was curious who's the third example of somebody that joined NATO from the SS. That was like or founded NATO from the SS. But what if we want to focus
feel like
on the
you're getting,
Azov
like,
battalion,
I'm
right?
looking for-
Like any military assistance we send to any country in the world is probably going to help a Nazi somewhere, right? Because militaries just tend to have more far right people or nationalist people than any
I'm
other military.
against. I don't think we should send military assistance.
That's great. I don't
to
care. That wasn't what
Europe.
the conversation was about. The conversation was whether or not
I think
we're
we
armed.
should.
You said that's. I don't care. That's not what we're talking about. You said the conversation was whether or not we armed
Yeah, it is.
the Azov battalion, right? So
Yeah.
we send money
Yeah.
in arms to Ukraine, right? The Azov battalion and every other paramilitary battalion was integrated into the Ukrainian armed forces in 2014. So of course, any military assistance we send is going to end up with all the military of Ukraine. So how
Should
is
we
that?
keep sending them arms?
Yeah, of course. So they can defend themselves. Sure.
I disagree.
Okay,
Disagree.
if you want to
I
have a
don't think we should.
conversation on whether we should or shouldn't help other countries, that's fine. But you can't pretend that we're arming terrorist groups by sending money to Ukraine's military.
That's effectively what we're doing now.
Obama.
But no, that's not effectively what we're doing. That's one byproduct of like
It
the.
is.
Okay.
Just you're doing PR. You're doing a PR.
I'm not doing
Well,
PR.
no,
Now you're
I
having,
mean,
if somebody who's so well read, I
unintentional.
wouldn't expect to have such a one-dimensional view on like these types of interactions.
One-dimensional.
It's
This is what we
incredibly
do. It's what
one-dimensional.
our empire does.
It's.
It's
okay.
not.
All right.
Okay, what do you think the Russian perspective is? Like, do you have an equally nuanced view of like Russia's actions, or is it like what are their motivations? Why is Russia doing what it's doing?
Why is Russia invading Ukraine? I'm sure. Well, leading up to the most recent invasion, probably because the civil wars in the east were starting to die down. Turkey was sending Ukraine more and more of like a particular type of drone bombers that were like pushing the odds in Ukraine's favor. Russia had been continuing to move their military forces across the border, threatening Ukraine, such that if Ukraine didn't like cede these territories to the east, at some point like Russia's going to have to invade or they lose all credibility on the world stage. So I mean, it's just been something that's kind of like been building over the past year.
Does that make sense for them to do that in that situation?
Sure.
Okay, so they're not really doing anything like irrational, right?
No, but like somebody that murders somebody might not necessarily be being as well. But it doesn't mean it's right. I mean, I don't think they should be allowed to do it, yeah.
Isn't there like a difference between like killing someone like in a way where it's like, you know, like self-defense and then like, you know, murdering someone? Isn't there, it's like different things?
But if you're gonna say that Russia's not acting irrationally, then of course the West is not acting irrationally either, right?
Of course not. I don't think the West is acting irrationally. I think that the presentation of what they're doing is false.
Well, but that's the same of Russia and the West as well, right? Russia's presentation of like denazifying Ukraine is a joke, obviously, right?
I think Putin means that as kind of a sneaky, like he's like making like it's like a very funny. If you speak Russian, he's very funny.
No,
He's
it's like
making jokes.
it's just propaganda.
He's making fun of
It's
their
literally
he's making
propaganda.
fun of their propaganda.
Okay.
That's what he's doing.
Okay.
Ironizing the Ukrainian propaganda in a very clever way. Like he's fun. He's making a joke.
Gotcha.
Like, that's one thing that doesn't translate that well. But
Of course.
I can tell you, as a Russian speaker,
Uh-huh.
he's making fun of Ukrainian propaganda when he says stuff like that.
So-
like when he's like, "Oh, you want to like decommunize? Like we'll show you real decommunization."
They're not,
He
who are they
also said that-
decommunizing? They're not invading Russia to decommunize anything. How
No,
is it-
but
doesn't make
they
sense.
said that. They said that. He said that. Because, okay, I'll explain to you the joke Putin made in his like speech in February. So, Lenin created the district known as the Ukraine as like an administrative district, right? It had never existed as an administrative state with like borders defined as the Ukraine ever until that moment. So and then this current hegemony in the Ukraine has been eliminating statues of Lenin under a policy they're calling decommunization. So Putin made the joke that if they want to really decommunize, that he will get rid of the borders that Lenin made, making it a Ukrainian like state, and taking it back into Russia. That's the joke. You see?
I don't think it's a joke. I think it's been presented enough times.
Was a joke.
Okay, gotcha. Can you speak some
Telling
Russian
you,
for us? I'm
Russian
curious.
humor.
Wait, can you say some of that in
Я
Russian?
говорю по-русски немного. Я говорю как дураком, но изучал в университете.
Okay, gotcha. Just making sure.
A while. I'm kind of rusty, but I did study it in college for years, and you know I read a lot, and I have Russian friends.
Okay. So, I mean, if we agree that the West and the East are both acting rationally, then I guess both of them we don't disagree on. That's fine, sure. Although it seems
Okay,
like Russia's
so-
not being very rational because now they've like empowered all of NATO to hate the fuck out of them, and more people are considering joining NATO and
They
their
don't really have
military
a
operation.
choice on that.
They absolutely had a choice. They just didn't have to invade Ukraine. They could have like shored
they-
up their own stuff in their own country and
You
focused.
know, Russia wanted to. You know, they wanted to join NATO back in the day.
Yeah, kind of. It'd been floated a bit in the early 90s and even under.
Why weren't
Putin.
they allowed? Why weren't they invited in with open arms?
Well, they were allowed, but I believe Putin said he didn't want to take the normal process. He wanted to skip the line, basically. I think he said he was insulted that they'd have to go through the normal steps to do it, so they didn't pursue it.
I mean, because he considered it basically as like because Russia's like this huge power, right?
They're
It's
not
sort
a
of
huge
like,
power.
that
Russia's
Russia-
not. They think they are, but they're not anymore. It's not the
Historically-
cold. Who cares about historically? We're not talking about history anymore. We're talking about the now. We're not
We are,
joining
we're
NATO
living in
historically.
history.
No, no.
We're living in history.
No, we don't. That's great if you were a superpower in the 50s and 60s or whatever, but that's not where we're at right now, right?
Okay, but they have a ton of natural resources. I'm saying it's a massive place, you know, it's big power. It's a big land mass with a ton of resources and a ton of different peoples. Like, it's a big thing. So, like, I think it's like, you know, when we created the UN, Russia got to cut the line. But then China. Became,
Okay.
like, they're
We're
on
not
the
talking about the
security board,
UN
you know?
right now, right?
But like the idea is if NATO is supposed to be this sort of similar like transnational like means of like mutual defense and like, you know, policy discussions, et cetera, then why wouldn't they want to have Russia involved?
They could.
Because it's
They
actually
just have
not.
To, they
It's
just have
designed
to.
to destroy Russia.
It's not designed to destroy Russia.
It is.
It's not. It's the when is
Why
NATO?
did it exist?
Well, initially,
NATO get
initially
created?
NATO existed as a counterpoint to the Soviet sphere of influence. However, post collapse of the Soviet Union. Now NATO just kind of exists for the general security apparatus of Europe.
Security against
Anything. It's hard to attack a country when they're in
such
NATO.
as,
What?
such as like, so who's threatening them? Who's threatening NATO?
Nobody threatens NATO. That's the whole point of NATO. You're not threatened when you're in NATO. That's the point.
So they have complete unipolar power over the entire world. NATO runs the world.
I mean, in a roundabout way, not really,
And you
because
can't
NATO
fight it.
typically only applies to like European countries generally, although that might be expanding. But yeah, you don't attack a NATO country. That's the point.
Because they're number one. Imperial power number one. Everyone else, like, get fucked. Like, you're a loser. Join NATO or submit.
If you're 4 years old, I guess. But the reality is that when you're in NATO and you have a military alliance like that backing you up, you don't attack a NATO country because you know you'll always lose, right? And no other world power wants to go to war like that, because why would, because war sucks.
About Vietnam. Like, Afghanistan. Didn't NATO fight Afghanistan? Like, aren't there NATO troops, like, in Afghanistan? What happened there?
Is Afghanistan in NATO? I might have missed it. I'm sorry.
No. Oh,
What are you asking? What are you saying?
I'm asking, like, what, haven't these, like, forces been defeated? Like, when's the last war we won?
The Iraq War? I don't know. What do you mean?
We won? We win in Iraq? I don't know. I don't feel like we won. But
We invaded and we deposed the leader. Yeah. I mean, what do you mean?
okay. So that's a W for you? I don't know.
You're asking different questions. Do you want to just talk about like missions? Because in terms of missions, I mean, like theoretically, like even Libya was considered a win. The mission was accomplished. I mean, if you want to ask a broader question about like for the
And
overall.
we saw he died. I know.
Okay, so if you want to ask a broader question, that's fine. But you can't ask us like, well, did we win a war? Like, yeah, we did. I mean, we won in 2 weeks in Iraq. But it depends on what you're asking. I don't know what you're at. Well, I know what you're at. You're jumping from topic to topic, obviously, right? But yeah, fuck. You're running around on
Just, like,
so many
trying to
different
understand,
topics.
Do you think this is like a force for good in the world? Like NATO? is a
NATO?
force
Yeah, I
for
would
good
say
in the
so.
world?
Yeah, for sure, generally.
Really? Why?
Because I think that
You're just saying, like, you know, they depose these leaders, they create chaos, like in.
I don't
like
think
Libya,
generally
like,
they
Iraq.
they only create chaos. I think I generally support at least most of the NATO missions that I've read about. So yeah, I think I generally
Depleted
support.
uranium and like Kosovo, things like that.
Do you think the intervention in Kosovo was a bad idea?
I told you, I'm like a real American. I'm opposed to like all European.
That's not a real
interventions.
American. That's like a brain-dead populace
is.
that thinks that like we shouldn't do anything.
That's what
in
the
either
founding
country.
fathers wanted.
Okay, Kosovo I think is like
Founding
one of the
fathers
literally
wanted.
like most pro-American countries in the entire fucking world. Like,
Oh,
I think they were happy that we intervened, but I mean, okay.
I don't know. I personally just don't think that we should be involved in governing like the world. I think that we
That's
should.
great.
You know,
That's fine.
Do
But
a
like,
better job of.
I think that if you were
considering
like an
so
Albanian
many
being
problems
ethnically
here.
cleansed in Kosovo, I think you were probably pretty happy that NATO intervened there. But I mean,
I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily true.
well,
Maybe-
the 90%
maybe what's the
approval
other
rate that
side?
they have today of the United States, which is like higher than fucking almost any other country in the world, seems to disagree with you. But maybe you just don't care about those people because
Yeah,
you're.
I mean, I guess if you were like a landlord in like Nicaragua, and like you get the right wing death squads are funded by America. I guess you
Gotcha.
really like America too, you know.
Okay.
So who's to say? Who's to say who's good or bad? I don't know.
Okay. Well, I don't have such a weird view of the world, so I guess it's hard to agree on that. But yeah,
No, I
so
just
I mean,
think
what
that
do you think?
America's not
I
a
mean,
force for good in the
okay,
world.
hold on. This
I think
is
it's a
this is kind of
force
what I'm
for
talking about, right?
bad.
This is like this conversation, the schizophrenic conversation of like bouncing around to random topics, not really saying anything of note, not usually like anything insightful, nothing of value. Like we've just like jumped from like, do you understand that this conversation has like gone over like 50 different topics, and we haven't like really talked about anything. We haven't said anything of value, either of us.
I'm more just trying to like figure out like what your like general vision is, because
No,
I'm
you don't care about my
understanding-
general vision is. You don't have
I
any
do.
idea of what my general vision is. You have like a
think I
huge
do.
grand narrative that
You
you're
think
trying to fit every
you
part of the
support-
world into, and then you're interested, I guess, when part of my
support
view, like
the hegemony. You support the prevailing hegemony. You think it's better than anything else that exists in the world.
I think that
And,
you're NATO as
willing
an
to
organization
overlook
that countries
a lot.
voluntarily join is superior to another country that, yeah, invades countries, takes them over, and tries to steal their territory. I would say that, yeah, generally.
I just think it's like a very naive view of how things actually work. Like, frankly, I just think you're very naive.
I mean, you can
Like, I
say
don't think that's
naive,
how the
but like
world
your
works.
everything you've talked about in this conversation demonstrates like an insane amount of naivety. Basically, U.S. bad is your entire
That's your
policy.
judgment.
And no, it's not. It's based on
I
what
don't
you've
think
said.
the U.S. is bad. I don't think the U.S. is bad.
What do
I
you
don't
think
the
would be
people
better for
in America are
Ukrainian
bad.
people? You think them joining NATO or Russia taking the country over?
I think that it would be better for Russia to take it over. Yeah.
What about Ukraine?
I don't. Do you know what Ukraine means, like in its own language?
What about
like
Ukraine?
Where the word comes from?
What about the country of
Do you-
Ukraine?
What do you know about Ukraine? Like Ukraine? What does that mean?
What do you think
What does it
about the
mean?
country of Ukraine? Here's what
I
I know
think
about Ukraine. In
it is a
1991,
creation
they declared themselves
Western
independent from the
policy.
Soviet Union, and their borders were recognized by the rest of the world, Russia included. That's what I know about Ukraine, including Crimea, by the way, which was illegally annexed by Russia in 2014. That's what I know about Ukraine. So the country of Ukraine,
Legally,
the country
according to-
of Ukraine. So who would be better for Ukraine? Them joining NATO or Russia going in and doing what they want with the country?
Russia.
Why?
Because they have the like same like sphere of influence, and like they have like similar like world. They speak like basically the same fucking language. Their histories are mutually tied together. They're like inseparable throughout all of
Literally
history.
none of these things are a good argument. Do you want to go through them one at a time?
They are. They are a good argument.
Okay, languages
I mean,
being
sure.
similar is not a reason for one country to invade you. That's not a good reason for them to invade you and take your shit. Number one. The second
an
thing that you
invasion.
mentioned, it is an
I don't know
invasion.
what this is like.
You don't. You
Okay,
right now. You don't
so-
think there's an invasion in Ukraine?
To be clear, I do not think the prevailing regime of international law is authoritative or has absolute value.
Wait, who? What are you
Like,
even
I
saying
don't
right now?
care
We're pivoting
what the
again. It's
claims
another pivot. This is
of
another
the
pivot.
internet.
Okay.
Because what you're saying is that right now in the current international legal regime, that this is recognized as a country.
It's like a
blah, 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 blah,
Markov
blah.
chain
That
of like
doesn't matter
random
to
big
me.
statements that you make. Like I feel like if I had like your DMs another person, like with Haas, I see why you guys are friends now. You guys say so much, but you're not actually saying anything at all. It's just like it's like Markov chaining together
Well,
a
a
bunch
lot
of
of
foreign
people
policy
think
terms.
that I say a lot.
No,
so
that,
that's
yeah,
your
I
judgment.
understand. I agree. There probably are people because I know people like you that think they're saying a lot, and then people listen to you and they think you're saying, but you're not really saying anything at all of value. There's nothing you're saying.
Well, I know people like you who think that when
Mm-hmm.
they can't understand something or see where something is going, that they determine
I
that there's nothing
understand
there.
everything you're saying. If you think I don't understand something,
I don't
feel free
think
to
you
ask.
do.
Okay, you just gave me some strange statement about how you don't value the judgment of international communities in relation to military
Yeah.
interventions in other countries. Now, I understand why you
Yes.
might say that because a lot of those international communities are
Obama.
headed by people like the United States or people like the UN who are going to
Yeah.
be biased towards Western values.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. I know what you're saying because it's copy-pasted, thoughtless dialogue from other leftist conversations. But the reality
No, it's not.
is
I'm not
hold on,
a
wait, let me
leftist.
finish. The reality is that that Markov chain of ideas has nothing to do with the question that I asked you about whether or not Russia was invading Ukraine. You pivoted to another Markov chain
Yes, it
talking
does.
point
the
that you have.
definition of invasion, the definition of invasion is determined juridically by these.
You don't think
international
that we can
courts.
have some third-party definition of is that country
No,
invading
there's
the
no
other
such
country?
thing as a fucking third party.
Okay,
What's a third
sure.
party?
Okay, gotcha. Let me boil this down then into other words because I played video games. Do you think that Russia has men with guns and soldiers in tanks and some airplanes going past the borders of
country
Ukraine
bullying small
in an aggressive
countries.
manner to blow stuff up? Do you think that's happening right now? Yes.
Are we
Okay.
doing that in Libya? Did we do that in Libya? Was that an invasion or was that a police action? I
In
forget.
Libya,
What was that
in
determined?
Libya, we didn't go there to seize territory from the country.
Okay, what did we go there for?
To get rid of Gaddafi and to stop the ethnic genociding that was going on there. It was a very limited scope of mission.
Okay.
It was so limited and it was so obvious that Gaddafi was so fucked up that I don't even think Russia or China voted against this military action. That's how fucked that place was. Was the aftermath of Libya good? No, I agree. But you want to compare Libya, where we went in with a specific mission goal, you want to compare that intervention to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where they're trying to steal territory?
Do you believe? I'm going to ask you just sincerely. Do you literally believe?
You're not. You're
that
pivoting
we
again.
took out
You're
Gaddafi?
pivoting again. Yeah.
No. I'm asking.
You're,
you a
no,
sincere
you're trying to
question.
pivot to another topic.
I'm
It's
not
like, it's so
pivoting
obviously
because
not
you're talking-
comparable.
It's not. I'm not pivoting. Oh my god. Can I just say what I'm going to say?
Yeah, go ahead.
You think we really went into Libya to stop a genocide? That's the reason why we went.
Yeah, there was literally a UN mandate related to like chemical weapons and shit. People were being like
Keep
tortured
hating
and
your life
gassed
then,
in that
working
country.
class
Yes.
Andy.
You think that's why we really went, is because of a moral concern from the UN. That's why that happened.
You tell me.
No, I'm just asking you, do you think that's how world historical decisions are made? Is like you have the UN doing just these objective reports on like human rights or whatever, and they go, hey, this world historical crime against humanity is happening. We need to assemble like the Avengers and go in and stop it. That's why that happened?
No, my broader understanding is that there is a general understanding of how the security situation ought to be set up in Europe, is a general understanding. Okay. And with that general understanding, when people who are either in Europe or very close to Europe are doing really fucking weird things, like using chemical weapons on their people, these are types of things that nobody likes. So if we see shit like that.
We ever use chemical weapons on our own people?
Past the year 1990? I don't know. Have we?
Yeah.
When?
Multiple times. I mean, what do you
name one time?
Like,
don't just say multiple times. Give me an example.
When they send in riot troops and they gas the areas with gas, like, is that a chemical weapon attack or not?
I think through military terms it is. But do you think that Gaddafi was using tear gas against his citizens?
I'm sure he was.
Okay. Fuck. This is really boring. Okay. Are we good?
I don't know, like you're just saying things are boring when you want to like.
It's boring because you don't
go into detail.
No,
like,
I am trying to go into detail.
out.
You're trying to tell me that tear gas is comparable to fucking nerve gas, bro. Like, what do you want me to say? Like,
do you know how much shit America does to its own citizens? Like, it's insane. Like,
do you see how you pivoted now to another topic? Now we've gotten away from the Russian invasion into Ukraine. You tried to compare it to Libya. Now you want to talk about tear gas in the United States. Do you see pivot? Do you see how you can't? Because you don't actually know about any of these things. You just have like these Markov chains of like leftist propaganda that you've memorized about these places, and you like to recite them.
Dude.
I'm not projecting because I'm willing to go in on any of these things. You're the changing the topic, not me.
I am.
I haven't changed any of the topics here.
You got bored.
You are the ones that are.
You got bored.
I'm getting bored because you're changing topics so much. Like,
okay, so we're just going to talk about this specific thing, right? We're talking about the UN. We're talking about third parties.
We were talking about Russia's invasion into Ukraine. That's what we were talking about.
I am saying that Russia's invasion into Ukraine is, in my understanding, not like an invasion in the sense of like conquering territory.
It literally is there to conquer territory for spoils. What do you think Crimea was?
Crimea is where a lot of ethnic Russian speakers who were not a fan of the Ukrainian regime that NATO and like the CIA, amongst other people, helped establish in the late like
do you
Obama
think
era.
that
Like,
do you think that hold on, do you think that a group of people not being a fan of a government gives another country the right to step in and invade and annex that territory?
Isn't that what we do?
When?
In Libya?
We annexed Libya? Holy shit. I got a US passport. Can I go fucking fly there right now? What are you talking about? You don't understand what you're talking about.
We deposed them.
No,
okay?
we did not threaten
government.
their territorial sovereignty such that we are annexing parts of Libya. That didn't happen.
Did any parts of Libya declare themselves as an independent republic?
Sure, they might have. And you know what? Stuff related to Bosnia and shit happened afterwards with the collapse of Yugoslavia. But that's not what I'm talking about. We had a UN mandate to go to Libya. It's different than one country invading another country to seize territory. Why would you compare the annexation of Crimea to NATO intervention in Libya? It's not the same thing. We didn't go in to steal.
The UN said so?
I think if there's a collection of countries that are okay with things, I think that it gives you a slightly stronger mandate than one country acting unilaterally. It was literally a unanimous vote with the UN Security Council that China and Russia sit on. How are you going to compare this to Russia's annexation of Crimea? Also, again, notice how you've pivoted back to Libya. When I asked you, is it justified? Is it justified? There were no chemical weapon attacks in Crimea. There was no genociding happening in Crimea. What is Russia's justification to annex that peninsula?
That it's historically been a part of Russia.
And that's enough reason to invade and steal something? Can Mexico invade the United States and steal property from, or any of the number of countries in Europe?
I hope so.
Okay, so everybody in Europe can just invade everybody else in Europe and take everything because it used to belong to other people at some point in time?
Sure. Whatever. I don't care about Europe. Like, I want to leave. Like,
okay,
I care about America.
Do you see the pivot? Holy shit! I don't care about
Europe. It's
not
really
now.
a pivot at all. No. I'm saying that my goal is to get all American military bases off of the face of the planet.
Yeah, I
right?
know. I'm sure.
My goal is to completely dissolve this empire. Like, right? So, like, I don't want any of these things to exist. I want the Europeans to deal with them shit themselves. I don't want to be involved. I want our people to go over there. I don't want to be funding anything over there. I don't want to be sending arms to Europe. I don't want all of these because the reason is like our funding of these things has negative effects on us at home. Our creation of this empire hurts us here.
Our
It hurts
creation of
us
the empire
every single
helps us.
day.
It ensures the
No, it
safety of
doesn't.
trade all across the world. It gives a lot of people
capital.
What?
It helps capital. It helps
Yeah,
capital.
well,
It doesn't
capital
help
that
us.
exists in our country. You don't think that any of the
Well,
benefits of any of the capital
exists in
flow?
banks.
Okay, all right. Okay, fuck, Jesus, holy shit! It's like, I see the Markov chains. Oh my god, it's so
It's not a
annoying.
Markov
It
chain.
is. It's
Yeah.
just like it's all these statements.
Ja, dauert halt seit Zeit. Stunde. Handy einrichten braucht immer lang, das macht man normal nur selber. Ja. Nur nicht, wie gut das jetzt mit dem Synchronisieren und so funktioniert. Wenn nur übertragene Kontakte sind, die sind ja nicht wirklich als Google-Kontakte angelegt. Aber synchronisiert sind sie auch auf Google. Ich weiß auch nicht, ob das so eine smarte Idee ist. Wie wirklich Geschäftskontakte enthalten sollte, ich weiß. Aber der Papa hat nicht 400 Kontakte, der hat 1000 Kontakte. Ja.
30 seconds until minions spawn. The forest holds many surprises. Minions have spawned. Such a busy world. Come closer. Things aren't always what they seem. Take careful steps. Death is indeed. Wait until you see the root.
An enemy has been slain.
So much more to see.
An ally has been slain.
Venture off the beaten path.
An ally has been slain.
What lurks
An enemy has been slain.
One for the road.
First. An enemy has been slain. Promising garden. The forest holds many surprises. An enemy has been slain. Such a busy world.
This is the road to
An enemy has been slain. Just wait. Come closer. Things aren't always what they seem. An enemy has been slain. Take root. Venture off the beaten path. An ally has been slain. Just a harmless flower. Promising garden. Killing spree. The forest holds many surprises. Rampage. Shut down. Such a busy world. Come closer. Things aren't always what they seem. Take careful steps. Wait until my seeds take root. So much more to see.
God, you're bad!
Just a harmless flower. Promising garden. An ally has been slain. Many surprises. Such a good enemy killing spree. An enemy has been slain. Things aren't always what they seem. Take careful steps. Wait until my seeds take root. So much more to see. An enemy has been slain. Pierce. Turret plating will soon fall. Shut down. A promising garden. Killing spree. Has been destroyed. The forest holds many surprises. Your team has destroyed a turret. a busy world. Come closer. Rampage. Things aren't always what they seem. Rampage.
Was that me?
Your team has destroyed the turret.
This is but a fragment of intimacy.
Wait until you see it is unstoppable. So much more to see. Venture off the beaten path. The harvest is upon us. Just a harmless flower. Briar. The forest holds many surprises. Such a busy world. An enemy is dominating. Unstoppable. Slain. Things aren't always what they seem. Your team has destroyed a turret. Take careful steps. until my seeds take root. So much more to see. Venture off the beaten path. This flower. A promising garden.
Chew on this.
It's many surprises. Such a busy world. Come close. Here. Shut down. Take careful steps. Until my seeds take root. Just wait. So much more to see. Rampage. Has been slain. Shut down. The forest holds many surprises. Such a busy world. been slain. None will escape my grasp. Things aren't always what they seem. Has destroyed the turret. Wait until my seeds take root. An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Venture out the killing spree. Just a harmless flower. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor. Promising garden. The forest holds many surprises. Shut down. Such a busy world. Shut down. Come closer. An enemy has been slain. Always what they see. An ally has been slain. Bloom. My prey thinks itself clever. Take careful steps. Wait until my seeds take root. Just wait. so much more to see. Live first.
This back.
Just a hum. A promising garden. Shut down. You missed. The forest holds many surprises. Shut down. Enemy has been slain. Double kill. The enemy's inhibitor is respawned. Such a busy world. The enemy's inhibitor is respawning soon. Here comes closer. An ally has been slain. Death is in bloom. An ally has been slain. Things aren't always what they seem. What lies beneath the soil? Your team has destroyed an inhibitor. You have been slain. Your turret has been destroyed. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor.
that are just like I've heard like a million times before, like rearranged into random nonsensical fucking. This is what I mean when I say you lack critical engagement, right?
Random or nonsense.
You
It's not
can't
random or
critically
nonsense.
engage with anything I'm talking about. You're just like hopping from
I
one
am
talking
critically
point. You're
engaging.
not. You don't.
I'm not.
What do you think? Hold on. What do you think critical engagement means?
Critical engagement means really listening to what the other person has to say and like trying to understand what they're trying to say and to like, communicate something that you're trying to say and to have that communication like happen. Like critical engagement just means like having a real conversation.
Then why do we keep
and that
hopping around
requires a
so
lot
many
of
different?
questions.
How do we keep hopping around to so many
Because-
disconnected topics?
Because it's become clear to me talking to you that we don't share a lot of the same fundamental experiences, you might say, like, right? Like I can't talk to you about something if you have no fucking clue what I'm saying, right? So I'm trying to find somewhere that we share enough of
Okay,
like the same like
where do we share
experiences
enough?
that we can have a meaningful conversation about
Sure.
it.
Where do we
had
share
meaningful
wh- wh-
conversations earlier in this?
No, we
when
haven't had
both were
any
talking
meaningful
about things.
conversations yet. We haven't had a single
been
meaningful
nothing?
conversation. Okay.
Not a
What?
single thing.
No. What part of a meaningful conversation can we have where you can explain to me why Crimea's annexation was a justifiable thing by Russia? Besides, there were a lot of people in that country or in the peninsula that speak Russian.
Well, because the people there were approving of it, like they wanted it to happen, and the Russian people themselves were very much in favor of it. It was a very popular action. In fact, like Putin's approval rating was going down because he wasn't doing enough to annex.
So if a
these
people in a
republics.
peninsula like another country, that gives that country the right to invade them. To invade Ukraine
That
and
is
take
right.
that property.
That is right. Where is this right
Moral
coming from?
justification.
I'm not talking about right.
That's what we're talking. Yes, it is. You're literally talking about
Okay,
justifications right
who
now.
does Putin have to morally justify himself to?
Well, right
in his
now,
actions to-
around the entire world, we tend to agree that it's not good to invade countries and steal their territory. That's not a good thing. We don't like that. Do you think that should be an okay thing? Do you think maybe, you know what? Let's back up. Maybe you're right, actually. Do you think fundamentally the world would be a better place if countries could just invade people and take their land? Should we go back to that?
I think we're already in that. It just depends on what country
We're
you
not
are.
in that. This hasn't happened in
just has to
30
be what
years.
country
It's
you are.
fundamentally a brand new thing. This has not happened. Doesn't happen in the world in decades, or not in the world, but in Europe for decades. That's why this is such a big deal. One country invading another to steal their land is shit that we don't see anymore.
Yeah, I don't agree with that framing of things. Like the way you're framing it is like leading to your conclusions. But I think that narrative, the story you're telling about this, I think isn't true.
What's not true about it?
I don't think because I think you have to have a larger context of this. What we have is NATO. We have a force that was designed to destroy the Soviet Union, which they did, and then we devastated the Russian economy in the 90s by sending in these like neoliberal shock troops to totally privatize and just pillage their economy. And it caused one of the largest decreases in like standard of living and like all of human history was the collapse of the Soviet Union. Completely terrible event that destroyed so much like human capital and wealth and caused like refugee crises and things like
We've
that.
hopped into
So
another
we
Markov chain,
created-
right? Yeah.
It's not a Markov chain. This
It
is
is.
history. I'm saying the story of Russia at this time period is like a much longer story. Like we have to go all the way back to like the Russian Empire fighting with the British Empire over this exact same thing. Do you know much about the Crimean War? Like the Crimean Wars between the British and Russia, like the great game over like Eurasia? Like this is the foundations of geopolitics, like Mackinder's World Island. All of these things are about conflicts in this region. And this is what
How long do you think he'll just like hop from topic to topic? Like, what do you think? Where do you think we'll end up by the time he's done talking?
really justifiable to like just invade a sovereign country and steal their land. That's just the ideological framing that we're providing it from this side of the conflict. That doesn't have like a world historical truth to it. That's just this hegemony's perspective on events. And I'm opposed to this hegemony. So I don't agree with the fundamental story that it's telling about reality. See what I'm saying?
I have no fucking idea what you just said, but maybe it's because I don't read enough, I guess.
Yeah, do you want to critically engage with it, or do you want?
There's nothing to engage with. You're not
making.
making any profound statements. It's just like a bunch of like little.
It's not true.
It
I just made a
absolutely
lot
is
of
true.
points, and just because you have stated that I haven't doesn't mean that I haven't.
Okay.
You're just saying that, like, rhetorically, your denial that I've said anything meaningful makes it not meaningful. Like, that's all you're saying. You're saying, in your estimation, you didn't understand or find value in what I'm saying. That doesn't mean there's no value or no meaning to what I'm saying. Maybe you're not the one critically engaging with what I'm saying. Maybe you're not.
Every
providing good
time I
faith
try
in
to
trying
engage,
understand
I
what
can't
I'm
even.
saying.
I barely am catching my breath, running from point to point with you as you like hop from one thing to another. So,
Okay, I have a lot to say. It's a complicated thing. Do you have patience?
it's not
or do
that you have
wanna
a lot
know?
to say, and
It
it's
doesn't
not that
seem
it's
like you're that
complicated. It's
interested.
that you just have a really bad time like critically engaging with the topics. So you have a lot of random things you want to say that mean nothing.
I think that's what you're saying. I think that's how you view it, but I don't think you're right about that.
Yeah, well,
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying like maybe you could like try to critically engage with what I'm saying. And like if I'm saying something and you're like, wait, what do you mean by that? We could have a conversation about it. But what it seems more to me is that you're not that interested in learning anything about this or in engaging with a different perspective. You're pretty content with your own perspective, and you're mostly interested in just like fighting off what you see to be like attacks and like the validity of your perspective. Like, that's how I feel. I don't feel like you're trying to like learn or understand or have a real conversation. I feel like you're looking for like a moment or place which you can like shut me down or like in a way where it's like now the conversation's over. Like we haven't even like had critical engagement across like what I'm trying to say. I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say.
I don't.
Like I don't think if I ask you, okay, so if you could just sum up for me, what am I trying to say? It's usually the test, right? Like if you can tell me what I think in a way that I would agree to your wording of it, et cetera, or to the general understanding, then we actually have communicated something.
Sure.
But I don't think you're capable
My
of doing that
understanding
right.
of what you're saying is that in the most macro, broad sense of the world, okay, the entire statements that I'm making can basically be understood as kind of like this curtain that's been draped over everybody's eyes from, I could call it like the neoliberal establishment, I could call it a Western establishment, I can call it a US hegemonic establishment, but basically there's like this story that the US hegemony likes to tell the world, that the US are the good guys, that NATO's expanding to protect countries and provide security in Europe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, behind the scenes, you have these more contrived political powers that are backed by capital that are essentially trying to like export their influence and everything all across the world, especially across Europe, especially in contrast to communist or socialist movements, especially in contrast to like Russia. And that the entire goal provided for examples of things like the Nord Stream Pipe 2, or the idea that we are contrary to some of our values, like drafting people from Germany into NATO, even though we say NATO is supposed to be a mission for peace, that all of these things serve as giant blocks, giant pillars to understand that the reality is that all of this stuff that's being built around the world is just to serve the interests of a few people that are really high in these hegemonic positions in the West, that are really high, these really high capital holders, that they don't really represent the interests of the average person. And part of the reason why I guess like the world is falling apart is because either people are slowly starting to realize that, or these people can only serve their interests for so long before everything falls apart for everybody else. That's kind of what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, it's a basic Marxist hermeneutic.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. I just think it's all stupid. So now where do we go?
Okay, so why do you think that's stupid?
For a million reasons. One is because to have an analysis like this, a macro perspective on this, we have to get micro on every single little claim. Does capital really control the prevailing interests of the political class, or is it the citizen? That's an important thing that we have to have a discussion on. It's a really big discussion, and it's not even. It's nowhere near. No, I think that the public has a huge control over the elected class.
Really?
And you run into and you run into this time and time again. I don't care. I don't care what you're gonna say. Okay, you run into this time and time and time again because people will say things like, "There's a ruling class, there's an elite, et cetera, et cetera." It's like, oh, really? Well, how do you point to the fact that people like Bernie Sanders got kind of popular? Oh, well, the ruling class kept him out, so he was controlled opposition. Oh, okay. What about people like Trump winning the election? That guy wasn't ruling class. Oh, well, actually, they ended up picking. Like, there's always an excuse why that like this conspiracy works most of the time, but it didn't work in that time, or why? Like, and eventually, at the end of the day, we end up debating all of these really nebulous, weird, stupid things that don't really translate to anything real at all. We have to talk about like the Bilderbergs and the fucking demon gardens and the groves or whatever. I don't even know half the fucking shit because it's so boring to me. Okay, and we don't actually get to discuss anything that's happening in the real world. Instead, we elect for these like really exciting and really fun narratives that we think can explain all of the world's problems because they're way more fun and interesting to talk about than kind of the more boring on the ground realities of the world we live in.
I'm not opposed to talking about the micro level either, but I think that like they inform each other, right? Like if you have an accurate view at the macro level, then it helps you have a more accurate view on the micro level.
I disagree.
Too, right?
I think that the macro level, that abstraction necessarily needs to be derived from your individual understanding of what's going on. And in fact, I would say necessarily, because if you have a macro understanding first, you're only going to selectively pick the micro things that fit that narrative, and you're going to preclude any ability you have to actually have a greater understanding. Of what I think it's definitionally true. Anybody that approaches something with a macro level understanding of what's going on without even knowing what's going on is always going to pick and choose because the world is huge. huge. What are we at, like 8-9 billion people? You can always find events, you can always find facts and figures, you can always find a study to support your prevailing macro theory if that's all you're looking for. So I think that approaching things with a macro theory first is horrible. You have to look at a whole bunch of different micro things, and then you can structure macro theory based on the things you've seen.
No, my macro theory here isn't something that I'm like coming with, I like arrived with a priori, etc. Like I've come to this view through like having gone through many other worldviews, right? And like challenging myself with like tons of different like perspectives and evidence, etc. So it's like really this view that I've come to, like that I'm trying to describe, it's not something that I came to like a priori or whatever. And I understand that you deal with like a lot of like Western leftoids and like people who are like kind of unserious about reading this stuff, but I'm asking you to like actually treat me as if I might know a little bit more than some like dullard leftoid or whatever who's just like mouthing off, as you say, like Markov chains and things like that, because that's not really my perspective. I'm not like, I don't agree with them on most of the things that they would say. I have read a lot of Marx, obviously. I've read a lot of things, but that's like been very influential to me, and so have a lot of other things, right? But I don't agree this idea that like you have to pick either doing things from like constructing on the micro level into the macro level, or from the macro level and then conforming the micro level to that. I think that there's like a dialectical engagement here. Like when I go and investigate things on the micro level, that will change my mind on things on like the macro level too, and vice versa, you know? Like it's kind of a perpetual process of education. I'm not trying to pick one over the other.
Okay. All right. Well, listen.
I'm saying we can have a conversation at the macro level, or we can have a conversation at the micro level. But if what I've been trying to do is to move between those two, and I feel like that's what you has been throwing you.
Gotcha.
Like you don't want to move between talking about the micro level and then back to the macro level and then back to the micro level, back and forth. But that's generally how I think.
Okay.
That makes sense. Does that make any sense?
Yep, I gotcha. Okay. Well, listen. It's been fun. I'm gonna play video games because that's my dialectic engagement with the world. Okay.
Okay. Well, let me know if you ever want to read books.
Okay, I'll think about it. Okay.
I can help you out.
Okay. Have fun, buddy.
All right. Peace out.
EA Sport. Eagle. Oh. So A can't be here, can't be here, can't be here, here. So A has to start with it. Angel. No, because G is not in it. Apple. Apple. Huh? Am I missing something here? It can only be Apple. Asple. A-apple or something. I'm just gonna try it all, I guess. Got it on the 4th try. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. Brute forcing. Yeah, of course I brute force it. What the fuck's an ample? What is that even? What's an ample? Enough. Or more than enough. Yeah, okay. Who uses that, by the way? A ample amount of trolling. I should start using that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's only AD sound today. We're not gonna count LP, we're not gonna flame me when I int. We're just gonna have a good time today, okay guys? Yesterday I got so tilted because I tried to win. So today we're going into these games not trying to win. How long are you in Korea for? I haven't decided. We'll see if I do the whole MSI thing or not. I have an opportunity here where I can stay kinda how long I want, because Nemesis is great, right? So he gave me the opportunity if I wanted to. I have to really think about it. It's the MSI stars. The MSI thing starts, and wouldn't want to miss that, right? Wouldn't want to miss it, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm never going home until I reach Shell, right? Minimum. Good one, man. You're so funny. Yeah, nice. Yamato said the exact same thing as you guys. Your guys' humor is not predictable. Man, you're so funny. I'm never going home until I reach Shell, right? Minimum. Good one, man. You're so funny. Yeah, nice. Yamato said the exact same thing as you guys. Your guys' humor is not predictable at all. That's hard shove. Greg is terrible early game, so he can't stop me. He can't, like, punish me. Q start? Whoa! Okay, he's out of field or something. Must be the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. I guess that's not a strat. the shake? I did. That's pretty rough. Suboptimal start here to the game. Suboptimal, you can definitely say. Nice. Shit! This guy's completely cracked. Never mind. This guy legit wanna fight me or? Whatever, it's fine. If I get to lane versus Gragas every game, then it's gonna be a good day, but I will let you live. I don't feel like killing you. Damn, Gragas. Man, this fucking CC. Dying. I am dead. That's crazy. Played it pretty badly. Sure. Now, am I allowed to build Hullbreaker on an AD Scion day? Hullbreaker is kinda tanky, right? Whatever, I will build it. I will not restrict myself that much. Vex is dying here. She's already dead. Cards will want this blue buff, so I guess I won't take it. I'll just push towers. I guess it's death angle, for me at least. Need 4 fucking cool stacks. Imagine if I had it, I would have Hullbreaker. I guess I'll have to stall it then. I'll just buy the Yomus for now. This is so scuffed. Dead. Bye-bye. It's fine, I guess. I will take over this side lane now. Dude, can I get charge a Q, please? Okay. That is ridiculous. And now I'm dead. Never mind. Versus Gragas, as long as you have a minion wave, you're good. As long as Gragas can't hit his body slam, you never lose. So just hide behind your minions. Ooh, turret or Krugs. Hard decisions. Wait, what if I take both? One more kill on this Gragas in side lane and the game is over. And he can kill they can kill me and it's not over for me, right? But if I kill them, it's over. It's because of how fast I take towers. I'm not playing this so well. And team's losing. That's bad. I'm piecing out, I think. Maybe not. Maybe death angle. Oh. This guy didn't wanna live. He walked back into my... Not a fan of this fight, really. Well, we have a game on our hands, don't we? Samira will go and kill my team. I have to make sure I get bottom inhibitor. I can take this and run, right? Nice. Chills. The only one who can basically kill me here, like, consistently is Samira, right? The rest of them are burst mages or supports. The only one with legit damage is Samira. So as long as she's not on me, I can't die. But if she is on me, my team can't die. I see her on the map, so I can just know, I know I can just run up here and I will be fine from all danger. Yeah, this guy is very weak. very, very weak, this guy. It's a surrender. Yeah. They're pinging me! Well, well, well. That Sion is really good. Oh my god. I mean, there it is, guys. High elo Koreans are telling me I'm really good.
I heard I was going to be on the TV with this attorney instead of dressed like a lawyer.
Oh, yeah? Well, I thought it was a sports thing. I would come relaxing. I think that
You look
be a
good, Joe.
relaxing thing, you know.
You don't explain why you dress like you are.
Well, that's what, you know, I'm a dresser.
You look
better
good,
believe it.
Joe.
I feel good, too. That's what I feel like I should dress for this kind of show.
I decided to put Ali on the left, Frazier in the middle, and Howard on the right. Howard said to me, well, that's not the way we usually do it. We usually do it with me separating the two interviewees. And I said, Howard, I think I'm going to get more out of it by the two of them sitting together.
You just got too many white followers. They don't like it for that. They figure you must be a good boy.
Yeah, good boy.
For the first 5 or 6 rounds, Ali was taunting Joe as they were narrating the fight, which was the normal thing for Ali.
All of you people watching this show, look at Joe Frazier's head now. But watching real
Which
good.
one you talking about?
Then as it wore on, Joe was becoming a little bit more frustrated with it. And at one point, Joe said to Ali, you went to the hospital.
That's when he went to the hospital now.
Please, Joe, don't talk about no hospital. You know you're wrong bringing up a hospital. I ain't gonna say about no hospital.
They don't want to mention it.
I went to hospital for 10 minutes. You went for a month. Now be quiet.
At that point, Ali said, you're ignorant.
It's not ignorant the man is. Why'd you bring up the hospital?
I went to the hospital.
And Joe stood up, ripped off his microphone, and said, what do you mean I'm ignorant?
Sit down, Joe.
Why you think I'm ignorant?
Sit down, Joe.
Huh?
Sit down
Why
quick.
you think I'm ignorant?
The brothers are here.
Doing this too?
No. Sit down quick, Joe.
Well, we're having a scene, as you can see, and it's hard to tell whether it's clowning or for real between the two fighters.
Howard sat there calmly like he was doing a fight in the ring. He was calling the fight in the studio.
Joe Frazier is really angry. Muhammad called him ignorant, and he's really angry. I don't think this one is clowning at all.
It was sort of crazy in the control room. Certainly, we never expected that to happen. We never expected them the two of them to get physical. A lot of people felt that it was put on, because their fight was only a few days away and would create some hype. Anybody in the studio that day wouldn't have believed that. They were serious. They were very serious in going at it, especially Joe.
A classic fight between two extraordinary athletes. Joe Frazier's watch came off. There was a wrestling bout on the floor, and we're really very sorry this happened.
Our stagehands and others were trying to separate Ali and Frazier. Ultimately, when they got him separated, Joe got up, bolted out of the studio. That was the last time we saw him for the day.
Joe Frazier is leaving the studio now, and he is deeply upset at Ali calling him ignorant. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry, Joe. We're going to try and get this back, and we'll be back in just one moment.
You be on time.
I think it certainly spurred their rivalry for the next fight. Joe resented the fight that happened in the studio, resented everything that Ali had said to him. I think
Das Stahlwerk Azovstal in Mariupol, mehr als 11 Quadratkilometer groß mit zahllosen Gebäuden. Hier sollen sich nach russischen Angaben etwa 2500 ukrainische Soldaten verschanzt haben. Sie leisten erbitterten Widerstand, um die strategisch wichtige Hafenstadt zu halten. Ein russisches Ultimatum, die Waffen niederzulegen, ist verstrichen. Heute wird wieder von heftigen Angriffen aus Mariupol berichtet, besonders in der Nähe des Hafens und des Stahlwerkes. Zugeschaltet ist mir Joachim Krause, Direktor des Instituts für Sicherheitspolitik an der Universität Kiel. Schönen guten Tag.
Guten Tag, Herr Behrendorf.
Wie schätzen Sie die Lage für die verbliebenen Kämpfer in Mariupol ein?
Ja, das ist eine sehr tragische Situation, weil die Situation ist völlig aussichtslos für diese Kämpfer und auch für die Zivilisten in der Stadt.